As a police officer, you will never stop being surprised at how often people will incriminate themselves. Most of the time, you just stop talking and they will give you all the information you need, or show you in this case. We got a call to some row houses. There were about 7 units together. A fire had broken out and fully destroyed the units second from the end. It was only about 6 or 7 p.m., so most people had evacuated themselves or were coming back from work to find fire trucks on their lawn. It would be a rough day for most, but nothing catastrophic. I was tasked with knocking on the other units to make sure everyone was out in case the building collapsed or exploded. I get to one of the units, and an Asian man comes to the door sporting a gas mask on his head. He barely spoke English, so I was trying to explain that we needed him to vacate the property until we gave the all clear. Cluing into the gas mask, I asked him what he was doing and why he had that on, fully expecting some story about how he saw the smoke and was trying to protect himself. Through his broken explanation, he essentially admitted to me he didn't hear anything because he was in the middle of a meth cook. He even invited me into his house. I didn't have to peek in farther than 10 feet to see cooking paraphernalia scattered across the floor. Of course, I arrest him and put him in the car. He continues to express his confusing as to what he did wrong. He could have just opened the door and walked out, and we wouldn't have thought anything of it. Plus, the fire had been going for almost 2 hours, so he had ample time to hid the evidence.
I'm an inpatient nurse and was doing my normal rounds. It was busy as usual and we were short-staffed. One of our newer patients was a man with mad cow disease. Not something you see a ton of, but it does happen. Now this man was fully incapacitated by the disease. He had been in a medically induced coma for the last 2 years and there was 0% chance of recovery. For those that don't know, mad cow disease attacks the brain and by the time it's infected you it's pretty much over. His wife, however, didn't believe this and was holding on for any hope. It's tough, some people are clearly delusional about potential outcomes, but most understand it and just can't let go. They had been married 35 years and it broke my heart every time I saw her in his room. Holding his hand, brushing his hair, talking to him, and praying he would come back to her. We did our best to maintain his level of care. He was full of tubes which we actively had to adjust and keep clean to reduce infection. He was known of having these deep phlegmy coughing fits that were very aggressive. So I was in his room adjusting his pillow and checking his vitals when he erupted into a coughing fit. I was probably 5 feet from his face when all of a sudden I get hit with phlegm directly in my eye. In a matter of seconds, it went from the grossest to the most terrifying thing I have ever experienced. I instantly run to the eye wash station and do my best to clean it out. I tell my supervisor, who is basically like, that's not great, yeah, thanks for the help. Where do you go when you work in the hospital but get injured or need help? Down to the ER, and guess what? You don't get any special treatment just because you're the nurse. So there I am, sitting in my scrubs, literally freaking out to my core that I'm going to die all while having to wait 5 hours to see a doctor. Finally, my turn comes. I get examined, questioned, poked and prodded. They're doing what they can, but here's the kicker. There's no definitive test for mad cow exposure in this situation. They can't magically tell me if I'm in the clear or not. It's a nerve-wracking wait-and-see game. The only true test is a brain biopsy. So they let me go and give me some steps to follow up with my doctor. I go up and fill in my supervisor. She says, all right, so let's get back to our rounds, okay. That's nursing for you. 5 years later and I've gone in for multiple checkups and everything appears to be all clear, but man, that was a bad one.
I'm an EMS and we responded to a house call from a man who said he couldn't get up. This could mean a lot of things, but we weren't given any more information. We arrive at the house and are greeted by an unlocked door and 2 yappy dogs. They looked like Yorkies or something. The house smelt awful and was absolutely filthy. I call in to see if anyone is there and I hear a man yelling faintly in one of the far rooms. We mask up and head in. There are flies everywhere and cockroaches climbed the wall. When we get to him, he's sitting in an electric scooter on the far side of the bed, facing away from us towards the wall. He calls out for help again and we let him know we are there. He says his scooter died and he can't get up or move. He's been stuck for days and was only just able to reach the bedphone to dial us. No problem, I think, as I get ready to back him up and spin him around. After a few minutes, we are able to turn him. Then I notice his feet. He has huge swollen ankles the size of volleyballs. Clearly a diabetic. But worst of all, his toes were gone. Not gone, like amputated. Gone, like his dogs had chewed them off. All that was left was little pieces of flesh that hung from the knuckles. I ask him what happened, and he brushes it off. He was more worried about his dogs than his missing toes. His legs were clearly necrotic, and we needed to get him to the hospital or he was going to die from septic shock very soon. We do what we can, and my partner goes to get our stretcher. Now, he was a big man, probably 250 pounds. So, we knew it was going to be a battle to get him up. We finally get the leverage we need and pull him out of his chair. The smell could have put me in a coma. As we shuffle him onto the stretcher, I look down and see all the skin from the back of his legs had peeled off. This man had been sitting in this chair for so long, he was fussed to the leather. He seemed unbothered the whole thing. It took a week to get the smell out of the ambulance.
Motels are the epicenter for seedy behavior. I had colleagues who would just post up near budget hotels and run plates. Easy way to make quota. You are almost guaranteed to find at least someone with unpaid tickets or a warrant. I guess it shouldn't be a surprise, but you don't find the finest folk at a per-hour motel. So you can only imagine this hits a multiplier working in Las Vegas. I am talking the lowest of the lowest in some areas. I always say, Vegas has the unique ability to show you the absolutely pinnacle of excess side by side with the absolute disparity of addiction, poverty, and crime. Sure, you see it elsewhere, New York, LA, but Vegas has it right in your face. 5 minutes off the strip, and you go from $10,000 per night rooms to a $15 for 30-minute nap-and-go room. Anyway, I was on patrol undercover, and things were a bit slow. It was the weekend after Memorial Day, and there is a bit of a lull with residencies, taking a short hiatus and the strip just being a bit more reserved. A call came over the radio that there was a mother looking for her daughter. She was last seen potentially prostituting herself in and around the area. We had her plates and a general idea where she may be, so I was across from a motel she was known to frequent. Lo and behold, after an hour, I see her car pull in. I wait around for a bit and notice a few people come and go from the room she's in. I'm by myself, so I'm not going stage a major takedown, but I just wanted to ask her some questions. I see her come out for a cigarette, so I hop out of my car and make my way over to her. Before I can get there, a man comes up to me. "Who are you?" he asked. "I just wanted to ask this young lady a question." "You can ask me." "No, that's okay." "Look, you either ask me or you get the fuck out of here." I wasn't having any more of this guy, so I pulled my badge and asked for his ID. Eventually, he provided it for me. It turns out this guy was her father. We ended up arresting him. He was a gambling addict and was whoring out his daughter to feed his habit. I've seen a lot of stuff, but this one stuck with me. This poor woman, degraded and manipulated by her father. It really hit home.
We were called to a Lowe's parking lot around 7:30 for reports of a gunshot. The store hadn't even opened yet. When we go there, a manager came to greet us. He had all the morning employees locked in the store, but the parking lot was quiet and empty. It wasn't uncommon for someone to fire off a handgun randomly and then dart, so we didn't expect to find much. The manager explained he hadn't gone out to see what it was, but there was a car out in the lot they didn't recognize. It wasn't one of the crew members. Again, nothing uncommon, but we went to check it out. As we pulled up to the car, an older man stepped out and lit up a cigarette. He looked to be close to 90 years old. We kept our distance as we assessed the situation. "Are you here for the gunshot?" he asked. "What do you know about it? Did you see who did it?" He was quiet. He just kept puffing on his cigarette. He finished it and lit another. "I just want to have this last cigarette." Those type of words will trigger your instincts. People don't just talk like that. My partner asked again. "Sir, do you know where the gunshot came from?" He slowly reached behind his back and pulled out an old Luger and set it on the hood of the car. "I just couldn't take her anymore." And that was all he said. He had pulled into the lot, parked the car, and shot his wife in the head. I arrived at the government housing complex in Toronto, Ontario. It was midsummer, very humid and very hot. There wasn't a shot of air conditioning in this place, and the elevators were down. This was a rough building. in a rougher neighborhood, and it showed. The call had come in about a suspicious smell emanating from one of the apartments on the 7th floor. Before I got to the door, I knew someone was dead inside. That smell, it's the same thing any first responder will tell you. It's so distinguishable and it never gets any better. There was no response to our knocks, so we had to get the fire department to breach the door. The second they got through, the first man in dropped to his knees from the smell. I've smelt bad, but this was bad. Bad. The living room was a chaotic maze of discarded belongings, the remnants of a life consumed by disorder. Piles of newspapers, empty food containers, and forgotten possessions littered the floor. It was clear we were dealing with a hoarder, albeit not the extreme cases you see on reality TV. We made our way to one of the bedrooms. Beside the bed lay what was once a woman. You couldn't tell how old she was or the color of her skin. She must have been there a couple of weeks at least. Her skin had turned black like a frostbite victim. Her bodily fluids had leaked from wherever they could, and maggots filled her eye sockets. It was basically a pile of sludge, bugs, and bones. We call it in, do the official stuff like check for IDs, and begin the work to notify their family. The coroner was already on their way up to begin disposing of the body. I was checking a few last boxes on my clipboard when I heard a noise coming from a pile of garbage in the living room. At first, it scarred the hell out of me. I could handle dead bodies, but vermin make my skin crawl, and I could only suspect this was probably a big-ass rat. I tried to ignore it as we began to shuffle out of the apartment. But then I heard it again. It wasn't moving like a rat. This was something else. I had to check it out. I approached cautiously, my baton in hand. I began to move aside the trash, revealing a small form wriggling beneath the refuse. My heart raced as the debris gave way to a shocking discovery. A baby, no more than a year old, laying there amidst the filth. The infant was weak, malnourished, and covered in grime. Yet somehow, against all odds, it clung to life. The cries grew louder as I cradled the child in my arms. We radioed in for an ambulance and immediately got it in the proper care. I've seen a lot in my time on the force, but never anything like this. I followed up with the coroner, and the mother had been dead for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, that baby survived on its own. I tried to find out where that poor thing ended up, but never got an answer.
You learn as a police officer that old people are some of the biggest culprits when it comes to crime, mischief, and minor illegal activity. Some do it because, well, they are old, like accidentally walking out without paying for something. But most know exactly what they are doing. Ask anyone who works at a major retailer and they'll tell you old people have some of the highest theft rates. But it's not just thefts, it's everything. It's like they hit an age where they either don't care, are lonely, or just need some thrill in their life. A funnier one I had to deal with from a couple of years ago was a call from a concerned business owner at a popular sushi restaurant. It was located in a busy area and there was definitely no shortage of people around. They called because a car right out from of their main entrance was rocking. If you know what I mean. We get on site and see a nice Cadillac still going. I'm talking clear visible shaking. Like you would think it's about to explode if you didn't know any better. Keep in mind, this was 20 minutes after we got the call. We knock on the door. Now normally if you catch someone in the act, they'll go quiet. Or scurry around to put their clothes back on. Not these two. The lady, who must have been 80, 85, stepped out of the car butt naked. Not only was she naked, but she had a full dog collar on, and she was pissed. She came out yelling and screaming at us. How dare we do this and that, tits flying and fingers pointing. For 5 minutes she stood there going off while her husband laid in the back seat like he was ready to go round 2. The Viagra must have been pumping because I don't think he lost his boner the whole time. Finally, I got her to calm down and put on some clothes. Maybe it was the wrong move, but I let them go with a warning. Sometimes you just can't bring yourself to write the ticket.